Hey, what's up everyone? It's your boy Alvin Teaches Poker, and today I wanted to talk to you about the fact that mom and dad have been fighting, they're probably gonna get a divorce, and the truth is they don't really love either one of us, aka Doug Polk and Daniel Negreanu have been swinging their balls in a heads-up match at 200, 400, and the action has been exciting to watch and analyze, to say the least. Today, I want to talk about a hand that Daniel posted on his YouTube channel that seems very straightforward, but actually is a perfect example of one of the most difficult concepts in poker, ranking bluff catchers based on their blockers. As always, please like and subscribe, it really helps. Also, if you're interested in learning more, please check out my cash game course at overnightmonster.com. Now, I'd like to say that this is a heads-up match. There's game flow, reads, tilt, pride, embarrassment, and all sorts of other external factors that are influencing these players, so it's very hard to simply look at a GTO solution and say whether or not a play is good or bad. But if I were in Daniel's shoes, facing a known heads-up specialist who probably has a technical edge against me in this format, I would want to aspire to play as close to GTO as possible to try to nullify Doug's perceived edge. After all, that's what GTO is really good at, not losing. So, I think there's a lot of merit in analyzing how Daniel is playing from a GTO perspective because frankly, in many of these hands, Doug demonstrates that he can replicate solver strategies with high consistency, which is very impressive. Before I could actually analyze a single hand in the heads-up match, I needed a really good pre-flop range chart. So I fired up SimpleGTO, which is my preferred pre-flop solver, and designed a heads-up game tree. I gave both players a variety of bet sizes on the flop, as well as gave the out-of-position player the ability to donk small across all parts of the game tree. In the settings, I used perfect large with 55 buckets on the flop instead of the usual 30 and 4, and I solved to 1,000 iterations per node with very high stakes rake. I performed these solutions on a dual Xeon Gold 16-core processor, and it took about 1 hour to calculate 1% of the solution. Quick heads up, there's a link in the description below where you can get 10% off all of SimpleGTO products if these kind of solutions are something you'd like to model and run yourself, but just be warned that it is a very time-intensive process, but obviously worth it if you're trying to play poker for tens of thousands of dollars per hand. So first, let's take a look at the hand from Daniel's perspective.
Okay, we're going to do some in-depth analysis on the last session, which was a doozy. We're going to start it right off here. We got the 9-7 in the big blind. Heads up, you're going to defend that. Flop top pair, let's go. Okay, off to a good start to this session. Looking good. Got a spade in our hand, all kinds of fun things. Deuce shouldn't worry us too much, no big deal. All right, off to the river. Ace, whatever. He doesn't have an ace, right? It's fine. Can't fold a 9 heads up. All right, let's see what you got there. Let's take a look here. All right, you got an ace. Cool. All right. No, well, no big deal. Aces, let's go.
Defending 9-7 offsuit pre-flop, very standard, and he should flat facing a 2.3 sizing about 90% of the time. On the flop, Daniel checks, Doug bets 40% of the pot. Now, if you give the solver the option to bet 23%, 40%, or 75% on the flop, it's going to strongly prefer 40% with most hands, except hands near the top of its range that really want protection from overs like ace-9 suited or pocket tens. This is a common theme in GTO land. If the board is somewhat coordinated with multiple gut shots and a flush draw, you prefer slightly polarizing and sizing up your bet, as opposed to betting small with your entire range and giving your opponent the right price to call with a ton of hands. Doug bets 40%, Daniel calls. So far, all very standard. The turn is the 2 of diamonds, and when the board pairs, this signals two related ideas to me. 1, Daniel should have a donking range, and 2, Doug should size down on the turn and rarely bet pot or overbet. If we summon the hotness comparison, we can see that the 2, the 3, and the 9 are the best cards for the flop caller, who will generally have more paired cards than the flop aggressor, which explains both why Daniel should have some leading range to prevent the turn from checking through, and why Doug should slow down on these cards but continue to overbet on many other cards in the deck. Daniel checks, which isn't to say that he is unaware of these strategies. It's very possible that Daniel does have a donking range here, and in this video we just see him randomize and check. But it's interesting to note that GTO does lead 9-7 offsuit and 9-7 suited more often than not, so you shouldn't ever see a snap check on this flop from Daniel. Doug, with A7 offsuit and the very wide range heads up, checks back, which you can see again is very standard. It looks like GTO really likes to check back a lot of ace and king high type hands on the turn to try and realize equity and sometimes win at the river unimproved. On the offsuit ace river, we see the main deviation that Daniel takes from GTO. Instead of leading with his quite strong hands, he elects to turn 9-7 offsuit into a bluff catcher. Now, again, Daniel might have a good reason for this. If he thinks Doug isn't going to pay him off when he value bets, if he thinks that Doug is going to fire here so often that Daniel's bluff catchers become really plus EV, it's going to be reasonable to check call this hand, though I think even if that's your exact read on Doug, you might still want to value bet such a strong hand as a 9, and then check call a lot of other hands that are good bluff catchers, like 4-4, especially when Daniel can represent so many missed flop draws with a bet. Also, by betting himself, Daniel gets to put out a 33 to 40% bet, and that's not going to be raised by all of the ace-x type hands, and so he gets to set the price of showdown and make it cheaper than if he, say, checked the river and then let Doug just barrel off with a pot-sized river bet, which is going to be very reasonable for Doug to make when checked to, as his hand is very near the top of his range given the action. So Doug pots it with ace-7, which is going to be totally reasonable for him to pick a large sizing here, and Daniel has a pretty easy call, right? Actually, it's not that clear. So when Doug bets pot here, what is he exactly representing? Often it's not just going to be a naked ace-x type hand. It's much more likely going to be some kind of slow played 2x, or it's going to be a strong ace type hand. So it's not likely that Doug is going to be betting this sizing with like a pair of 9s. So if Doug is representing ace-king and ace-queen with this sizing more often than, say, ace-3, the relevancy of having a king or 9 blocker is going to be really enormous. So facing a pot-sized bet, PIOsolver somewhat dislikes calling with 9-7 offsuit, so much that it actually prefers calling with king-3, queen-3, and even king-queen offsuit more than 9-7 offsuit. This is how profound the effect of blockers are on your calling ranges when you are facing big bets. It is often more important to have good blockers than have absolute hand strength. So we can see this effect is even more pronounced when we have Doug overbet the river. So when he overbets and polarizes his range even more to ace-king and ace-queen, we can see that PIOsolver responds by strongly preferring calling with king-queen over 9-7. Similarly, if we size down Doug's river bet and have him be less polarized, then 9x now becomes a better call down on the river than king-queen offsuit. The more polarized your opponent is on the river, the more profound the effect of having good blockers is. These kind of nuances and deep blocker sensitivities are what really separate great players from extraordinary ones. And now, it is completely possible that Daniel is aware of all of this and is randomizing in such a way that he's occasionally folding some 9x hands on the river, but if he's not thinking about folding 9-7 offsuit, then what other 9s would he be thinking about folding? Only 9-3 suited, 9-4 suited, etc.? How should Doug respond after he sees Daniel play this way? Well, if Doug realizes that this is a pattern that Daniel is doing repeatedly, which very much might be the case, I would probably subtly size up rivers with the nuts more often for value, knowing that my opponent is looking at his absolute hand strength more often than his blockers. There are probably some deep assumptions that you can also make with your river ranges if you know that this is how your opponent is thinking, but that's for another video. Now, as I make this video, I just saw that Daniel posted another video where it looks like he makes some really messy plays, tilts, and gets dunked on. So right after I wrap this up, I'm going to start looking through those hands, find some fun hands to analyze, and I will keep posting videos at hopefully a breakneck pace through the rest of December and January, because there's a lot of stuff that I want to analyze and talk about, because poker's been pretty interesting lately. So I'm going to look through those hands. Good luck, monsters. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, come check out overnightmonster.com, where we are running a Black Friday sale, even though it's somewhat near the middle of December. Peace out, guys.
Now they ain't go harder than me. They need a blade in a sheath, a shank in a piece, a crate full of heat, an army, a fleet, a tank in a jeep, a navy at sea with a submarine, an ace up their sleeve, a team of marines.